I was a huge Winnie the Pooh fan as a kid. I think it was because Christopher Robin, I'm not literally known as the other Brady. My name is Chris, so my first name was Christopher. I don't know. I was a big fan of Winnie the Pooh as a kid, and my good friend Holly Gallagher knows I'm still a big fan of Winnie the Pooh. I think he's one of the most underrated theologians that I've ever encountered, and she gave me this great book, Timeless Wisdom from Pooh, and we're going to have a short reading. I'm just going to read to you, Timeless Wisdom from Pooh. When you wake up in the morning, Pooh, said Piglet at last, what's the first thing you say to yourself? What's for breakfast, said Pooh. What do you say, Piglet? I say, I wonder what's going to happen that's exciting today, said Piglet. Pooh nodded thoughtfully. It's the same thing. That's funny. If you don't think that's good, I don't know. It's going to be a long Sunday. Here we go. I got another one for you. Don't wait. Didn't like that one. I got this one. What do you like doing best in the world, Pooh? Well, said Pooh, what I like best. And then he had to stop and think, because although eating honey was a very good thing to do, there was a moment just before you began to eat it which was better than when you were eating it, but he didn't know what it was called. See, Pooh make you think, right? And here is mine, and this is my favorite. It's more wisdom from Piglet than Pooh, but I just love it because it makes me think of my wife and my family and all of you. Piglet sidled up to Pooh from behind. Pooh, he whispered. Yes, Piglet? Nothing, said Piglet, taking Pooh's paw. I just wanted to be sure of you. It got a lot of awes, too. Isn't that just adorable? It is adorable. I loved Winnie the Pooh, but my all-time favorite Winnie the Pooh character, the book, was Eeyore. I think we've got a picture of Eeyore. There he is. A.A. Milne describes Eeyore as an old gray donkey, but it was Eeyore's attitude that I love the best. So show that other picture of Eeyore. Oh, yeah. That's the Eeyore I know and love. Eeyore, he just ain't having it. He's just not having it. After all, what are birthdays? Here today and gone tomorrow. Or my favorite Eeyore, could be worse. Not sure how, but it could be. Right, we all know an Eeyore, don't we? No matter the situation, the Eeyore in our lives will find a way to be a downer. And I am guessing at some point we have all played the Eeyore in a certain situation. It's just simply not good enough. It's simply no fun. Could be worse. Don't know how, but it could be. And believe it or not, the Israelites that we talked about last week, the Israelites that have left Babylon and come back to Jerusalem, well, they have some Eeyores as well. We are in our second week in the book of Haggai. It is a small, little-known minor prophet. And last week we saw God talk to the Israelites through Haggai and asking them to consider their ways. The Jewish people have returned to Jerusalem, and they've kind of gotten busy on their own comforts. They've gotten busy in life and those kinds of things, and have ignored the house of the Lord or the temple. In the Israelites' homes, they're going up, they're being decorated, but God's house, the temple, it's being ignored. But the temple is important. It's an important part of early Jewish life, and the Israelites have ignored that temple, but I think we need to understand the temple. Now, last week we watched a video from the Bible Project about the temple. I won't make you watch it next week, but this week it's important. It's an important 3 minutes for help us to understand the importance of this temple being built. Check out the screen behind me.
If you could go back to the city of Jerusalem during Bible times, the biggest thing you'd see is the temple.
This beautiful building was designed by King David and built by King Solomon, and they believed that it was the home of the God of the universe.
Wait, I thought God's home was in heaven.
Well, the whole point of this earthly temple is that it's the place that overlaps with God's heavenly home. The temple is where God lives and rules all creation as king.
That's cool, but even Solomon, who built the temple, didn't believe that it could contain the God of the universe, right?
Yeah, the building was just a symbol, and it pointed to the fact that all of creation is God's temple. And that's actually what the first page of the Bible, Genesis 1, is all about.
Really? It says that creation is God's temple?
Well, it doesn't need to say it. The whole story shows it. In Genesis 1, God creates an ordered world out of a dark wasteland by speaking in a series of 7 days. Then on the 7th day, God's presence fills creation as he takes up his rest and rule. Similarly, the tabernacle and later the temple were built and dedicated in a series of 7 speeches in 7 days, after which the priest or king could rest and rule in God's presence.
So all of creation is where God intends to dwell. It's like his temple.
Exactly. Now, turn the page to Genesis 2 and we get another portrait of creation. This one focuses in on the land. And in the center of the land is a region called Eden, which in Hebrew means delight.
And in the middle of delight, God plants a garden in which God and humanity live together.
And that's why the temple was modeled after the garden, filled with imagery of gold and flowers. The menorah symbolized the tree of life. It's the place where God dwells with his people.
Oh, got it.
And check this out. In the temple, the Israelite priests and Levites were to work and to keep the temple in God's presence. This is exactly the job description given to humanity in the Garden of Eden.
So these humans were the first priests. But instead of ruling with God, they wanted to rule on their own terms, and they're exiled from the garden temple.
And like Adam and Eve, Israel's leaders also wanted to rule on their own terms, and they too were exiled.
The temple was destroyed, and this left them wondering, did God give up on Israel? Will God bring about a new creation?
Well, the biblical prophets anticipated the day when God would create a new temple with a new priesthood. That's when God's presence would fill all of creation.
And when the Israelites returned to the land, they did rebuild the temple.
But that temple didn't turn out the way the prophets hoped. In fact, later Israelite prophets said that this temple was hopelessly corrupt.
So they're still waiting for the ultimate temple.
Still waiting for the ultimate temple. Hold on to that. Hold on to that as we move forward. The Lord's temple, the Lord's house, the house of the Lord, the temple, it's very important. It's very important in our narrative in Haggai, and it's very important to the Israelites. God gets on the Israelites last week. We saw him get on the Israelites, and he tells them things aren't going well in your life because you've prioritized yourself over me. The people of God respond to this rebuke, and they fear the Lord and obey him. They get to work on the temple, and we hear God say to them, I am with you. That brings us to this week. It's only 9 short verses this morning. Haggai chapter 2, verses 1 through 9. I'm going to read them for us. They're going to be on the screen behind me, and if you're online with us, they're going to be on your screen as well. Haggai chapter 2, verses 1 through 9. In the 7th month, on the 21st day of the month, so not quite a month later than when we first started last week, the word of the Lord came by the hand of Haggai the prophet. Speak now to Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and to all the remnant of the people, and say, who is left among you who saw the house in its former glory? How do you see it now? Is it not nothing? Is it not as nothing in your eyes? God speaks to the exiles, and he hits them with 3 questions. He says, who is left among you that saw the house in its former glory? How do you see it now? And is it not as nothing in your eyes? Within the 50,000 exiles that have come back to Jerusalem, there were some old-timers, some that saw the rebuilding of the temple, but they reflected on the temple that they longed for, the good old days of Solomon's temple. And the reason we know this is you couple with what we read here, and if you couple God's questions of the Israelites that we just read, and you put them together with Ezra chapter 3, verses 11 and 12, which say, and all the people shouted with a great shout that when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. But many of the priests and Levites and heads of fathers' houses, old men who had seen the first house, the temple Solomon had built, they wept with a loud voice when they saw the foundation, they saw the foundation of this house being laid. So putting these 2 things together, we see that people are starting to grumble. People are starting to grumble. This new temple that we're reading about in Haggai, it would never be like Solomon's temple. For some of them, their Eeyore is starting to come out. And when they say it'll probably never be like Solomon's temple, they're probably right. They didn't have the manpower back then. They didn't have the money that they had back then. To give you an idea of the temple that they're referring to, let me give you a glimpse of Solomon's temple from 1 Kings chapter 6. And Solomon overlaid the inside of the house with pure gold, and he drew chains of gold across in front of the inner sanctuary and overlaid it with what? Gold. And he overlaid the whole house with gold until all the house was finished. Also, the whole altar that belonged to the inner sanctuary was overlaid with, say it with me, gold. Pretty nice place. Okay, what they're remembering and longing for was a pretty nice place. This new temple, the one the Israelites were building in our verses, it's never going to be like the old days. You see, nostalgia had crept in. Nostalgia for the old temple, nostalgia for the old days, and that can lead to trouble. Nostalgia for the Israelites can lead to trouble, and nostalgia for Christians can lead to trouble. It has its dangers. Even Solomon knew that nostalgia had its dangers. In Ecclesiastes 7:10, Solomon wrote this, "Say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this." The Israelites are nostalgic for the old days. They long for the temple of old. I can imagine, can't you hear them? Like, in my days, temple didn't look like this. In my days, temples were incredible. Good old Solomon's temple. Oh, how beautiful it was. You know, back then, kids respected their parents. They didn't do drugs. They weren't on their phones all the time. I don't know if that's what they said, but you get the idea. Now, looking back isn't all bad. It goes wrong when we look back to how longingly for how we felt rather than who God is and what He's done. Nostalgia implies chasing a feeling. Webster's defines nostalgia as a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past. As followers of Jesus, we're called to look back, but not longing for a feeling, but reflecting on God's goodness. Psalm 77, "I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds." Remembering what God has done, that's a good thing. We're also called to look back on those who have played a role in our faith walk. I'm sure many of you can remember who first shared Jesus with you. Your baptism, the first person you shared Jesus with. Hebrews chapter 11 is just a list of these faithful giants of our faith. It's called the Hall of Faith, and they're meant to encourage us. Looking back on God's goodness and those that have pointed us to Him, that can be a healthy endeavor. But nostalgia, this idea of longing, the idea of wishful thinking, that things would just be like they used to be. Oh, to live in an Andy Griffith show, right? There's a danger in this for the Israelites, and it can be dangerous for us as well. And I have a parallel that I want to talk to you about that I think helps us understand this. As we see the Israelites given a task of rebuilding the temple, pausing and longing for the way things used to be, pausing, saying that things aren't as good as they used to be, we should pause and remind ourselves that this side of Jesus, we too have been given a task. I want, for just a moment, to remind followers of Jesus, just as God has called the Israelites to consider their ways and rebuild His home, followers of Jesus have been called and given a task as well. After His resurrection, Jesus leaves us, and He leaves us with these words in Matthew 28. "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age." It's called the Great Commission. Commission means a command or a duty to a person or a group of people. Here is our task. Here is our command. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing and teaching them Jesus' commands. In spending too much time looking back, there is a danger. Just like the Israelites, we tend to neglect the mission before us, caught up in our own comforts and our own lives, and neglecting the task that we have been given. We live in a world where 2 billion people have never heard the name Jesus Christ. No access to the Bible, no access to a church, and no access to a Christian. For those of us who have more years behind us than in front of us, those of us who have a few gray hairs, I won't say who they are, but can I just ask us not to focus too long on what's behind us? Not to be nostalgic for what was. You see, because our task is not finished, the job is not done that Christ has called us to. And the mandate to therefore go is still binding on us today. Brothers and sisters, do not spend so much time looking back that you ignore the call, the task to therefore go. And the Israelites stand before God as they stand before God with a task given them, They start to look back, and we'll realize that, we'll read in a minute, that God calls them forward. So too have we, this side of a risen Jesus. We've been given a task as well. John Piper put it this way: our task is God's call to declare that Jesus is the only way to heaven, and the alternative is hell. And billions of people are on their way there. And we have the only means of escape in our hands and in our hearts, Jesus Christ. LifePoint, I long for you to know the joy and the terror of sending your children to dangerous places to proclaim the good news of Jesus. I pray that we will not be a people that farm out reaching the nations to just those that are called. I pray that we are a faith family that has skin in the game. Follower of Jesus, you have been called. You have been given a task. God has given us a task to fulfill. He has called you to go to the nations. He has called you to participate in sending others to the nations. He has called you to pray for the nations. Let 2021 be a year that we don't long for a simpler time. Let it be a year where we strive to complete the task given to us by Jesus. Hear God's words through Haggai to his people, and hear them for us as well, adopted people, adopted into this family. When we're talking about the Israelites, we've been adopted into that family if you're a follower of Jesus by the blood of Jesus Christ. Hear God's call to the people of Israel to finish the task, not by looking back to what was, but by looking ahead to what will be. And when Jesus calls us to our task, he encourages us by saying in Matthew 28, I am with you always to the end of the age. The same God, the same task is encouragement by I am with you. God's presence is with us in our task to reach the nations, and he is with the Israelites in their task to complete the temple. Let's keep going in verses 4 and 5. God, through Haggai, says, yet now, not back then, not looking back, but now, be strong, O Zerubbabel, declares the Lord. Be strong, O Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest. Be strong, all you people of the land, declares the Lord. Work, for I am with you, declares the Lord of hosts, according to the covenant that I made with you when you came out of Egypt. My spirit remains in your midst. Fear not. God doesn't give people a task and then simply leave them to it. God isn't a hands-off God. God goes before us. He is with us in the task that the Israelites have been given and the task that we've been given as well. God calls the Israelites to be strong because he is with them. He calls them to three things: to be strong, to work, and to fear not. Let's sit on those for a little bit. Let's talk about be strong. I remember when my kids, I have three kids. They're not kids anymore, they're adults. But when they were younger, they all found their activities. And for a little while, I got to be the kind of the coach or on the sideline. You can run on the field and do whatever you want. But when they get a little older, they've got their own coaches and they're on the field, and I simply became an encourager, a cheerleader up in the stands. And all three of my kids found their niche. My son Cameron was a football player. My daughter Sierra was a soccer player. And Savannah practiced the art of Taekwondo. And when they got to that point where they were kind of on their own and doing their own thing, occasionally, especially when things went wrong or things weren't going well, they would glance at me up in the stands. Now, my wife has always said they've kind of always looked to me for approval, so there's kind of that glance up there. And I remember wanting, the natural side of me was like, okay, here's how you do it. Son, if you'll just break down, start chopping, you can tackle that guy. Or Savannah, if you'll just turn those hips, you can kick that girl right in the head. Or Sierra, just use your left foot. Just use your left foot. And that was my natural response. But being that cheerleader, that encourager, all I would do is when they would look up at me, I would give them one of these. It's all they'd get from me. Just to be strong. I can't come out there and I'm not going to come out there and carry the ball or tackle. I'm not going to come out and I'm not going to kick that girl in the head, right? But I'm your father. And I love you. And I am right here. Be strong. I think that's an earthly example of a divine encouragement. God calls the Israelites to be strong. He also calls them to work. The story of Haggai is like about God's people working on themselves, concentrating their efforts on their own comforts, while the house of the Lord, the temple, gets ignored. God called his people through Haggai to consider their ways and to get to work rebuilding God's house, the temple. It's a place that represented God's majesty and power and glory. And as they begin to grumble and they long for the past, God says, work. God's people are a working people. Even in retirement for some of you, God's people are a working people. Paul writes to followers of Jesus in Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord, not for men. Billy Graham said, read the Bible, work hard and honestly, and don't complain. It's that last one that gets me. Scottish physician and missionary David Livingstone put it plainly, fear God and work hard. Elizabeth Elliot, whose husband, missionary Jim Elliot, was killed in 1956 on the coast of Ecuador trying to make contact with the Auca people, said this, work is a blessing. God has so arranged the world that work is necessary, and he gives us hands and strength to do it. The enjoyment of leisure would be nothing if we had only leisure. It is the joy of work well done that enables us to enjoy rest, just as it is the experiences of hunger and thirst that make food and drink such pleasures. Be strong, work, and fear not. What is there to fear when the Creator of all things is with you? When God is for you, what can be against you? God brought the Israelites out of slavery. He parted the Red Sea. He created all things, knows all things, is in control of all things. Why should the Israelites have no fear? Because God is with them. I am with you, God says. God sees the Israelites getting discouraged. The temple isn't going to be as great as Solomon's. God sees the Israelites' discouragement, and he hears their grumbling, and he reminds them of his presence. I am with you. My spirit remains in your midst. He also reminds them of his promise. According to the covenant that I made with you when you came out of Jesus. God has made a covenant with his people. We don't talk a lot about covenants today, but we should. We should. They're one of the most important themes in the Bible because they act as kind of a skeleton upon which the entire redemptive story of the Bible is built. Tim Mackey of the Bible Project, who does the videos that we watch, he wrote this about biblical covenants. They're like the backbone of the Bible. From Genesis on, God enters into one formal relationship after another, covenants, with various humans in order to rescue the world. These divine human relationships push that narrative forward until it reaches its climax in Jesus. Thus, to tell the story of God redeeming his people through Jesus is to tell the story of God's covenantal relationship with his people. On its most basic level, a covenant is an oath-bound relationship between two or more parties. In a divine covenant, a covenant between God and man, God sovereignly establishes the relationship with his created. There are other nuances, but a covenant is fundamentally one in which God binds himself by his own oath to keep his promises. And God keeps his promises. The goal of all human covenants is summed up in words found all over the Bible. I will be your God, you will be my people, and I will dwell in your midst. The covenant that God mentions here through Haggai is referred to as the covenant that I, God, made through you when you came out of Egypt. This covenant is called the Mosaic covenant because it came through Moses. It was given through him. God rescues Israel out of slavery in Jesus. If you've seen the movie, let my people go. Think that from Moses. And God promises to make them his own treasured possession, a holy, set-apart nation. God will personally dwell in their midst and bring them into the promised land. He, Yahweh, will be their God. They, Israel, will be his people. God calls the Israelites to be strong. He calls them to work. He calls them to fear not. We see him remind them of his presence. I am with you. My spirit remains with you. We see him remind them of his promise, the covenant that he has made with his people. And next we see his power and his providence. Verses 6, 7, and 8. For thus says the Lord of hosts, so God says, yet once more in a little while I will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and the dry land. And I will shake all nations, so that the treasures of all nations shall come in. And I will fill this house with glory, says the Lord of hosts. The silver is mine, The gold is mine, declare the Lords of hosts. God will bring his glory. That purpose cannot be slowed. That purpose cannot be stopped. If there's one message that is consistent through Scripture, it is that God's purposes will not be halted. Amen? These 3 verses are a reminder of that fact. God says through Haggai, I'm going to shake everything. I'm going to shake it all, the heavens, the earth, the sea, the dry lands, the nations. Do you see the majesty? Do you see the power? One author put it this way: the shaking that is mentioned here is a rather colorful way of describing the fact that God is over every created thing. It is a reminder to the nation of Israel that his word was to be obeyed. And it was also a reminder that he would be able to provide the strength necessary to accomplish the task. When God calls us, he also provides for us. He provides the strength. He also provides the resources. During the 1800s, there was a missionary by the name of George Mueller in Bristol, England, and he cared for thousands upon thousands of orphans in England. And he would keep a journal. He was well known for journaling, and he would keep daily entries of just all the provision, miracle after miracle of God providing. And I'm just going to read one of them for you here. One morning, all the plates and cups and bowls on the table were empty. There was no food in the larder and no money to buy food. The children were standing, waiting for their morning meal, when Mueller said, "Children, you know we must be in time for school." Then lifting up his hands, he prayed, "Dear Father, we thank thee for what thou art going to give us to eat." There was a knock at the door. The baker stood there and said, "Mr. Mueller, I couldn't sleep last night. Somehow I felt that you didn't have bread for breakfast, and so I got up at 2 a.m. to bake some fresh bread, and I've brought it." Mr. Mueller thanked the baker, and no sooner had he left than there was a second knock on the door, and it was the milkman. He announced that his milk cart had broken down in front of the orphanage, and he would like to give the children his fresh cans of milk so that he could empty his wagon and repair it. God provides. God provides. And in our culture and in our day, it's easy to get lost in providing for ourselves. Yet in these verses, we're reminded with the Israelites that the silver belongs to God and the gold belongs to God. I had a wonderful interaction. A man comes by to drop off a check on Friday for this matching thing that we were doing. And I'll be honest with you, it's a big check. It's a really big check. And I was like a little taken back, and I said, "Hey, I just really want to thank you." And he goes, "It all belongs to God," and walks out. It is all his, and he will do with it as he pleases. The Israelites are called to be obedient, and God would provide the means. What a lesson for us today. We so often struggle and resist God's call to obedience because of our lack of faith in his provision. Hear God say to the Israelites and to us this morning that he is enough. That he is enough. And finally, this is where it gets so good. This gets so good. Finally, verse 9. "The latter glory of this house shall be greater than the former, says the Lord of hosts. And in this place I will give peace, declares the Lord of hosts." Here we see the capstone of our verses this morning. Not only would God provide, not only would the Israelites rebuild the temple, but God would eventually accomplish a greater work, providing a greater temple. God promises that the latter glory, some translations say final glory, that the latter glory will be greater than the first, greater than the former. God says something better is coming. He goes on to promise that he will give peace through the final temple. What is he referring to here in the book of Haggai? What is this final temple? What is this something better? If you've got your Bible, just turn a few pages forward over to Matthew 12. It's Matthew 12, verse 6. Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees. And in verse 6, Jesus says this, "I tell you, something greater than the temple is here." What is God referring to in Haggai? What is this final temple? What is this something better? LifePoint. It's Jesus. It's Jesus. Our final verses today point to Jesus. Jesus is the greater temple, and God is using the rebuilding of the temple that we're reading about and the hope contained within it to point to Jesus and the peace that he would bring and the hope that he would bring. I will give you peace, declares the Lord of hosts. The peace that the temple would provide, it would be temporary. It's not the final peace that God would provide, the permanent peace, the lasting peace. Another prophet spoke of that peace. His name is Isaiah. And I'm going to read to you from Isaiah 9-6. You might know it. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and what? Say it with me, Prince of Peace. There is one coming who can provide lasting and complete peace. LifePoint, our final verse this morning, it declares that Jesus is coming. I love the book of Haggai. I just love this book that I didn't really read before now. I just think it's great. Listen, we don't look nostalgically back, searching for a feeling. We look back on the goodness of God, who he is, what he has done and what he has promised to do, and his presence, his promise, his power, his providence. Just as the Israelites have been given a task, we too have been given a task to reach the nations for Jesus. And just as the Israelites hear God declare that he is with them, God is also with us. Followers of his son Jesus, adopted into the family of God through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And just as the Israelites, 500 years before the birth of Jesus, hear the message of his coming, we know of his coming, and we also know about his return. He will come back. He will return for his followers. We're going to wrap up Haggai next week. And I'm so looking forward to it. Sometimes when you're in the Old Testament, I think you can kind of get caught up in stories, you kind of get caught up in dates, kind of lost in the details. It all seems so distant. Know this. The book of Haggai points to Jesus. Jesus is the greater temple. And if you think our verses this morning point to Jesus Christ, you just wait till what happens next Sunday. I hope you'll come back.